Hey folks, Gene Galin here with the Chatham Journal. We're here at Northwood with the lacrosse coach here at Northwood, Randy Cox. But we're not going to talk about Northwood or high school lacrosse right now. We're going to talk about ACC lacrosse. This man, you're like one of the top 100 players that ever played in the whole state, aren't you?
Well, I think what they have classified as the ACC top 50 team, and so I'm one of those players, and that was certainly back in the early 80s that played in those games that earned me that honor, and so it's a privilege to be part of the ACC top 50.
Yeah, you're being modest. He was good, and he's still good as a coach. Let's talk about the ACC tournament coming up. It's this Friday and it's this Sunday.
Yeah.
I haven't had an opportunity to cover it much. We did put out a story about it, and my question is, you're still connected with UNC Lacrosse, though?
I am. Certainly have been part of the program for 44 years now, and I work the table in the box, work with the officials during most every home game, if not every home game, travel sometimes with the team, know the players pretty well, know the coaches throughout the ACC, and that also is, it's an honor to be a part of it.
Best memory that you've had in that function?
Oh gosh, best memory would be, I guess, this was a pretty good memory this weekend. Not so much about the win and the loss, but about the family environment that we've created at the University of North Carolina. We had our alumni weekend this weekend, and I don't know the exact number of alums that came back, but we had alums dating back to the 70s, had coaches that came back that coached in the 70s, all the way through to teams from the 2022 team. So it's a great gathering. They honored all of the All-Americans at halftime. It was great to be able to walk out with that group of players that have contributed to the game over the years, whether it be at the high school level, the college level, for Team USA, some playing in the PLL. And so it's a really unique and an awesome environment to be a part of.
You mentioned to me once, I think, when we talked, that you were one of the first UNC lacrosse players that Woody Durham had talked to.
Yeah.
And that was back, what, 78, 80?
That was 1981.
81, okay.
And that was our first national championship. And really, lacrosse in North Carolina really making a name for itself. So that, too, was a privilege. And so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it looks like the ACC is continuing to make a name for itself, especially this season, because right now, I think in the national lacrosse rankings, Notre Dame is number 1.
Yep.
Duke's number 2.
Yep.
Syracuse is number 4. Virginia is 5, and I don't know where UNC is.
Well, UNC ended up not being ranked, and part of that equation, every team's got great players, and every team, when it's time to rise to the occasion, you got to rise to the occasion. When you look at the ACC and you have 5 teams and 4 of those teams are in the top 6 in the nation, someone's going to be left out, right? And so you look at Notre Dame, they're 4-0 in the ACC. You look at, I think Syracuse ends up being 3-1. And then you have Carolina, Duke, and Virginia. And all of them have a 1-3 record, right?
Right.
So when you have that, and the reason we're not in the tournament is I say it to our boys at Northwood, I say it all the time, but the little things matter. And the reason we're not, even though we beat Duke, and the reason we're not in the tournament is because it came down to a goal differential, right? So all those things get weighed heavily. And each of those teams, 3 of which are 1-3, 2 are in the top 6 in the nation in terms of their national ranking. So it's a tough conference, there's no question. There are other good conferences, and each one of those 6 teams, even North Carolina, has great players. And Goaltending makes a difference. Playing between the lines makes a difference. Ground balls make a difference. And when I look at all the stats, the one thing that stands out is as each one of those teams that is 1-3, the goal differential, right? Like they could have very easily been 2-2 or 3-1, and it would have come down to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more goals at a certain period of time, and it changes the whole equation.
Now, was the Duke game the game where all the former players came back to?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So that you said that atmosphere was great, but I think UNC was an underdog going into that game, weren't they?
We were. I mean, we end up beating, and Coach Danowski, a great coach, and his staff. We end up beating the number 2 team in the country in what was an ACC showdown at Carolina, our alumni weekend. And the one thing that I do know about lacrosse, and yes, there's competition, but it really is one large lacrosse family. I have great respect for all of the coaches across the ACC and just across all of the different conferences, and we know each other. People know each other, players know each other, former players know each other, some of which Coach Danowski is a Long Island guy, I'm a Long Island guy, and so there's a great history outside of the actual game itself, day of. There's a great history that goes back 40 and 50 years for many of the players and many of the coaches.
All right, now I think that game against Duke, that was kind of the tiebreaker. UNC won, but you only won by 3 points, and you needed to win by 5. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that. I don't know all of the specifics as it relates to that. I do know that we were hoping that the Notre Dame-Virginia game might have turned out differently. I think if that would have been the case, then we would have been in. But because it turned out the way it did, Notre Dame did come back, beat Virginia. Then it really came down to goal differential, and I think it was +2 even and -2, and we were the -2, and so there you have it, right?
Last quarter of the game against Duke, what's the feeling among all you spectators where you're watching UNC doing well against Duke, winning the game, but then are you also wondering, well, what's Notre Dame doing? There's probably a whole bunch of concerns. You're thinking about a whole bunch of different things in that last quarter.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, any one of these teams has the ability to come back, and Duke did rally. So for me, I was up in the box and just talking to people. I was like, Carolina needs to make sure we stay focused because Duke did rally a bit, and I think it ended up being a 3-goal differential, right? Yep. So there was a much greater lead in the third quarter. But you can't count any one of these teams out. So this ACC tournament, right? Who's going to come out on top? I think it's anybody's game. And I go back to what I said earlier in terms of whether it's goaltending, whether it's between the lines, whether it's the defensive side of the ball. All of those little things are going to matter. And if someone has a breakout game, then where you might think Notre Dame might be on top, it could be Virginia. Where you might think Virginia might be on top, it could be Duke. It could be any one of these teams could win the ACC tournament championship.
Well, let me ask you, you mentioned Notre Dame. Let me ask you this question. My understanding is Notre Dame has 25 either seniors or graduate students. So they're probably one of the oldest lacrosse teams out in the U.S. and not just in the ACC. Is that a big advantage when you've got older guys that have been playing for a while together?
Yeah, no question. I actually, I look at rosters all the time, and I think the transfer portal and having those grad students and having another year to play and that development aspect of the game is critical. So no question, I think they have the most experienced team out there. Other teams, and I was doing sort of a little bit of a count today in terms of grad students, there's some that have 12, some that have 14, some that have 16. So I think everybody's trying to tap into that aspect of college lacrosse these days, along with the transfer portal. And I think bringing that experience in while developing those first-year players is also an important aspect. But Notre Dame, you know, they won the national championship last year. Yep. They've got a lot of experience out there. Those players have been here before, very similar to how I feel about our Northwood group. Going into the playoffs. We're young, but you know, having that experience makes a difference, and I think Notre Dame probably has the most experience of the 4 teams competing this weekend.
All right, well, let's get into a couple of those games, and then I want to get your feel as to how the ACC teams are going to do in the NCAA tournament. Is that going to be okay?
Yeah, I think that'll be okay.
All right. Mm-hmm. Friday night, first game. It's going to be number 4 Virginia versus number 1 Notre Dame. 5 p.m. game. What's your sense? What's Virginia got to do to win, and what's Notre Dame got to do to win that game?
Both teams, doesn't matter which one, they've got to control the ball on offense, right? Not throwing it away is going to be important. I think goalie play is critical, and Notre Dame probably has the best goalie in the country. And so, you know, having said that, he was just recognized postseason within the ACC. I think it really comes down to ball control, goalie play, and, you know, I say it again, and all of these teams have players that can have breakout games. And if someone, I don't want to use anyone's name right now. I want to be careful with that. But if any one of those key players for Virginia or for Notre Dame has a breakout game and performs at the level that they are expected to, and someone maybe has a bit of an off game, and you know, it's a team game, so a lot of times players pick each other up, and momentum swings are part of the game. So I think it really is anyone's tournament. I will give a little bit of an edge to Notre Dame because of their depth and because of having been in the big games before and the number of grad students and seniors that they have.
Second game at 8 o'clock is number 3 Duke versus number 2 Syracuse.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more an even type of game. Again, some of the stuff you mentioned probably applies to this game as well, but how's this game different than the Notre Dame game? And what's Syracuse got to do to win, and what's Duke got to do to win?
Yeah, so I think, you know, that is going to be a game of maybe toughness. Syracuse, you know, being from up north and the northern part of the state, right?
Yeah, they're up near Canada,
there. Yeah. They've got some great players. They're 3-1, right? So you've got a 3-1 against a 1-3. Part of it is for Duke, probably they want to go ahead and redeem themselves a little bit there, right? They lost the first time around. So I think that there's all of those aspects play out. And I know Coach Danowski, both coaches for that matter, will get their players ready. Gary Gate, a great coach, great player, will work to get his players to where they need to be mentally. A lot of the game is mental. When they came to play us, they played well. We were up and they came back, right? So, you know, I also know that all 4 of those coaches that are competing this weekend, not that Coach Bresci and UNC don't do the same thing, but you play till the last whistle and let the chips fall where they may, right? And so, very similar to what we're telling our boys at Northwood, you know, we're going to play till the last whistle. We might be the underdog, we might be rated to go ahead and win, but everybody, it's tournament time, and you give 100%, and let's see where things end up. Even if you're the last team in terms of the standings get thrown out the window. It doesn't matter.
Well, you proved that last year, but we're going to talk about high school a little bit later. We're sticking with ACC right now.
I got you. Yeah, no. It's you know, that will be a very gritty game. There's no question.
And we're not even going to talk on Sunday. The semifinals, they're going to play that at noontime. Mm-hmm. All these games are going to be on Charlotte. the first two games are on Friday, and then the final game is on Sunday. I may be down there. I don't know yet. Let me ask you this. Let's touch on who do you see as the ACC Lacrosse Coach of the Year?
It's already been announced.
Has it? Okay.
It's
well, I'm late here.
It's Coach Corrigan at Notre Dame.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And why should he have gotten ACC Lacrosse Coach of the Year?
Well, in my opinion, and my humble opinion, I am not the person that really should be commenting all that much on the collegiate level, but I have a history, so I will. I think anytime you do what you did last year and win a national championship, he's got great players that help take him there. And then you're able to come back and repeat and maintain that culture and be 4-0 against teams like Syracuse, Virginia, Carolina, and just the ACC teams in general. It's Duke. You can't not honor that aspect of what he accomplished, and so I think it's well deserved. And congratulations to him.
What makes the ACC so strong when it comes to lacrosse?
Probably a couple of things. A little bit of a complicated equation. Nice to have big-time football, big-time basketball in all of those institutions and universities, because that's where money and, quite frankly, you have a following that can support a non-revenue type of sport, right? And so that helps with facilities. I think that's a big part of it. If you go to any one of the universities I just mentioned, they have great facilities. There's just an overall energy that is part of those spaces. And when someone comes down on a recruiting trip, it's probably pretty hard to say no when you have great coaches that have played the game. You've got support staff that can help take a program to where it needs to go. You have, quite frankly, today, you've got some buckets of money that weren't there in years past in NIL money. Certainly with the transfer portal being what it is today and the way the rules are structured, now you can go ahead and transfer. It really is no penalty in terms of giving up any years to play. And so, even for that Division II top player that maybe wants to get to Division I, or the Division I player that is at an institution where they may or may not see a national championship, but they want to get there, I think the road to play for one of the top places in the country is different for players today. And so when you have, the academics, you have the facilities, you have the coaches, I think that's what really separates our ACC schools from a lot of the other places out there.
Right, and since I'm running behind, who was the ACC Offensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year?
Oh, gosh. Off the top of my head, I know the ACC Defensive Player of the Year was the goalkeeper from Notre Dame. It was, he was also the goalkeeper of the year. And Offensive Player of the Year, Gene, you asked me, and it has slipped my brain, and I apologize.
Well, let me ask you. Well, no, I'm not going to ask you this because it'd be unfair. I was going to ask you who would you pick as the offensive player of the year. But I'm not going to ask. I am not going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question though, and don't say anything that won't let you get back in the box. What's UNC got to do for next year?
I think the culture that we have is one that any team would appreciate. Very supportive, very family oriented. I think we have to focus on getting a couple of key players between the lines, the midfield line, to where we can control the ball a little bit more. I also think we have to work on getting all of our players, and hopefully we don't lose people to the transfer portal. The transfer portal can be a plus and it can be a minus, right? And so hopefully we've got some great players that if we keep them, we can avoid injury. We can improve those that we have in terms of their skill and their ability, and then attract some new players that are coming out of high school, and then some through the transfer portal. Then I think we give ourselves a chance. You know, when you look at the goal differential there, and you know, we lost several games by 1 goal. That's tough, right? But we're a young team. Our defense is young. We're a young team. One of our best players on the offensive side was a freshman, and so they grew through that, and hopefully they all stay. And then we continue to develop them. We get better. We bring in some people that can really complement what they're able to do, and we put ourselves in contention again.
Let me ask you this other last question here. If a player sticks around for 4 years at one institution, which of those years do you usually see the biggest progress in their development, or is that just depending on the individual player?
A lot of it's depending on the player, but I do think that, you know, sophomore to junior year, having a couple of years under your belt, being a little bit more mature just from an age standpoint, development standpoint. You know, you're 20, 21 years old in your junior year. That's probably a place where you see the most growth potential. But, you know, every player is different. There's no question. You know, if you look at, you know, you sort of have to look at the league as a whole, and this is the NCAA as a whole as well. It doesn't matter what sport, right? I mean, you have players that are 25, 24 years old that are playing collegiate ball these days. And so for a freshman to come in at the age of 17, 18 and compete against someone 25 years old, that's tough. That's not an easy task, and I think there's more and more of that. So I would say, just generally speaking, sophomore, junior year, but I also know the importance of the transfer portal and just growth and development, and just being a little bit older and developed in competing in today's college environment.
All right, folks, we're going to finish up here.